Greetings, this is iVideo. My name is John Savers. I'm your host. iVideo is a program which looks at history broadly speaking and tries to unearth interesting data to make the viewing public a little bit more aware of the subject matter. It's our feeling that the educational system and the media regularly omit important information, and that therefore the perspective of the general public is somewhat irregular, angular, and so forth, and it's our hope to partially fill in the gaps to give them a more rounded view. Now, we have been looking at World War II, the camps and the general area understood by the word Holocaust. We noted at the outset that over the last 50 years, the whole aspect of the camps has kind of snowballed so that it has kind of a leading position in the whole historical event, that whole arena known as World War II. We think that this is rather singular. We have proposed looking at this matter in a scientific, academic research sort of way, trying to find facts and to understand this better, and have not approached this as a religious event, which is sort of the exclusive domain of one particular group. Therefore, we have set forth this program. Now, of course, there have been people who are unhappy with the program, the facts and so forth like that. And in fact, they have set forth something of a clamor to try to, I think, obstruct this particular program and its easy accessibility to the general public. We regret this, but it's not altogether unexpected, as we have seen this sort of thing before in other areas in the realm of politics and the general political economy of the United States of America and other Western countries. So undaunted, we continue. Now, we have of late been looking at possible motivation behind this whole business. The singling out of the Germans as fall guys apparently began around the beginning of this of the 20th century, and kind of continued all the way through. And the public, the Western public, has pretty much bought it. We have noted that there have been atrocities alleged which seem to recapitulate atrocities committed by the people who are pointing the fingers in other contexts after World War I and the ravaging of Eastern Europe and Russia. We have produced some evidence to that point, and we will continue to assert this this theory, this postulation that a good deal of the so-called atrocities committed by Germans are fictional and represent the vivid memory of Marxist Jews recalling the atrocities that they committed themselves in Eastern Europe and Russia, using the material of Bela Kun, Tibor Samueli, etc., etc. We are now going to take a little bit more of a look at the so-called communist camps. Now, it might be said that Every one of the heads of the GPU, the secret police under Stalin, was a Jew, ending up with Beria. Abraham Isaacson Rottenberg is known to the criminal departments the world over as a dangerous criminal murderer and thief. Most of the mentioned Chekists were distinguished by the government for the successful transfer of exiles into the world beyond. This personnel impersonates the tragic position of the exiles who worked on this project, as their fate rested exclusively in the hands of these bestial GPU agents. This is a citation from Jewish-run concentration camps in the Soviet Union by Dr. Hermann Greif, pages 36-37, appearing in the Defender magazine, 1937, first edition. Now, it should be noted that although the Marxists, Jewish-led Marxist revolutionaries, for the most part, Grand Orient Freemasons, it seems, operated with extreme cruelty in consolidating their hold on the governments of East Europe and Russia, and particularly Russia was the gem. And it is these people then to whom Lenin and Stalin naturally turned. V.I. Lenin, referring to those Jews holding key positions in the Bolshevik system, Lenin said, "The role of Jewry will be most important in laying the foundations of the New World Order. Jewry possesses adaptable characteristics, together with outstanding intelligence and extreme cruelty. A Russian can never treat Russian counter-revolutionaries as cruelly as a Jew can." This is a citation from the Barnes Review, Volume 5, Number 3, May-June 1999, page 33, in a section on remarkable quotations during World War II. Well, now I'd like to give you an example of kind of a first-hand example, a rendering of what it was like. In Ukraine, NKVD guards who had heard the German artillery fire stopped a train loaded with prisoners and machine gunned several hundred inmates. Only 14 wounded men survived under the heap of massacred men and women. The German soldiers rescued 6,000 men waiting for mass execution on the road from Minsk to Smolensk. 500,000 Volga Germans, descendants of the Mennonites from Russia during the reign of Catherine II, were transported to the concentration camps in Siberia and Kazakhstan, where 3 men were killed every night for 2 years. 100,000 Mennonites were used as a human shield of the counterattacking Soviet army in the central Russia, dispatched to the front for work in labor battalions. 2,000 Ukrainians and Polish prisoners were killed by the dogs of the 207th NKVD Convoy Regiment in the plains near Artemovsk in the so-called Valley of the Shadow of Death. In Kharkov, NKVD men tossed grenades into overcrowded prison cells. On June 28th, German soldiers found in Dubno the horribly mutilated corpses of 500 women and children. In Tartu, the Germans found 192 bodies in a well. In Chervony, they discovered 4,500 murdered Ukrainian, Lithuanian, and Polish prisoners. In a Lithuanian forest near Rania, the Germans discovered 73 scalped and tongueless bodies tied to trees. This is a citation from the Barnes Review, Volume 4, Number 1, page 25, in an article by Dr. A.B. Kopansky. Well, what are the implications, you may ask? Well, let's consider. On May 23, James Meek, the Moscow correspondent of one of England's more liberal newspapers, The Guardian, wrote that the number of victims of Soviet political repression cannot be accurately assessed. The article notes that in the last 1990 edition of British historian Robert Conquest's book, the Great Terror, there is an estimate of 7 to 8 million people arrested in the Soviet Union in the years 1937-1938. Of these, about 1 million were executed and 2 million died in Gulag slave labor camps. This is a citation from the Barnes Review, Volume 4, Number 5, September-October 1998, page 44. Please attend. Tens of thousands of enemies of the people were imprisoned and deported to the Gulag. Ukrainian and Baltic prisoners had been subjected to unbearable tortures in the notorious Lubyanka prison at Moscow. Few were able to resist the horror of the perilka, or sweat room, where children were tortured in front of their parents. A small number of condemned prisoners survived confinement in the Sobotnik, or doghouse. Beria, Malenkov, and Merkulov frequently observed the torture of the prisoners, particularly when they were females. The bosses of the KGB were very excited when women's hair was torn out and their naked buttocks beaten with leather whips or rubber hoses. Stalin's instruction to all interrogators was simple: beat, beat, and once again, beat. Men and women were subjected to stoica, or standing, for 2 days until they collapsed. Their genitals were lashed with heavy, waterlogged towels. Their lips and noses were pierced with fishhooks and dentist drills. They had been forced to stare at 100-watt light bulbs for hours. In 1946, a special research laboratory was opened in the Lubyanka prison, and the communist scientists tested the effects of new drugs and poisons on the inmates. The Lubyanka Institute was closed in 1953, but the psychiatric experiments were continued until 1990. This is a citation from the Barnes Review, Volume 4, Number 1, January-February 1998, page 29. Well, now, most of the people who seem to originally have been put into these camps were dispossessed. Were there any legal reasons given for this, or any they just took it, or what? Well, consider. A multitude of decrees and enactments provide the legal ground for apprehension of the farmers in their exile. In this connection, the famous Decree of Protection of Socialistic Property, August 7, 1932, may be quoted. Section 2 of this decree reads, "All chattels of the kolkhoz and other cooperative establishments, the crops in the fields, joint reserves of grain, cattle, and all stock in warehouses, etc., are to be regarded as state property, and the protection service for this property is to be intensified. 2. In cases of this property being stolen, the maximum of social defense is to be applied. Shooting and confiscation of the entire private property, or in case of commutation of sentence, deprivation of liberty for not less than 10 years and confiscation of property. 3. To persons sentenced for theft of kolkhoz or cooperative property, amnesty cannot be granted. This decree carries the responsibility for the shooting of countless innocent farmers and a steady flow of material to the concentration camps up to the present time. The transports rolled endlessly out with apprehended farmers condemned to exile and forced labor. Another decree on the ground of which countless farmers, also workers, were sent into exile is the amendment of Section 36 and 61 of the Criminal Code of February 15, 1931. Section 2 of this decree calls for compulsion labor for persons found guilty of refusal to work. The regulation is strictly adhered to in case of farmers. The German-speaking element comprises a surprisingly large percentage of the compulsion workers and exiles. These ambitious and highly industrious people have for their stubborn adherence to their soil to stand the brunt of hatred from the Soviet government. Reports are pouring out daily about the apprehension and transfer to camps of German farmers. Germans in Russia are suffering in a special manner at the hands of the Jewish rulers because Germany has dealt so successfully with the communist problem at home. This is a citation from the Jewish-run concentration camps in the Soviet Union by Dr. Hermann Greif, first edition of the Defender magazine, 1937, pages 15 and 16. And so once again we see the use of the hapless others utilized in hard labor for the purposes of state projects. This has been going on for thousands of years, no doubt, and such people were used by the Egyptians, and such people were used all the way through into the modern times. And once again, it seems to be this Stalin White Canal project that was both the pretext for the concentration camps, work camps, the euphemistically termed camps, which in point of fact were death camps, slave labor camps, and so forth, which few survived. The projects were of nominal value. Whether or not a Baltic to the White Sea of the Adriatic Canal might have been a great project had it been done correctly, that is, in which it was wide enough and deep enough so that large ships could have utilized it or not, I can't say. It was thought at the time to be an impossible project to begin with. That's why the project had caught the fancy of Stalin, and he reckoned himself to be amongst the pyramid builders if he could get it done. But it was done, it just was not done adequate to the task and so forth. But it did start this concentration camp, slave labor camp, big time in the Soviet Union. And these camps continued on into and after World War II, and that in the entirety of this particular operation, the USSR was under the control of this part of the secret police by Jewish individuals, Marxists, and the government was always pretty much under the direct control of the Jewish Marxist population. Never mind the fact that individuals may have been purged along the way. Faction fighting is always with us, I think. But at any rate, this whole business here provided a great deal of experience, practical experience, by which the Russian communists could make vivid their claims against the Germans in the trials at Nuremberg. And more than a few people suspect that just this happened, that the Germans probably were accused of fictional crimes, and these crimes were made vivid by displacement of the crimes committed by these Marxists after the revolutions in East Europe and the Soviet Union, the toppling of the Romanovs and the establishment of the USSR. So whether or not this is something that all are prepared to accept and believe, I can't say, but it certainly is something which should be investigated further and given credence to. Now, I'd like to also give you a few more vivid examples of the horrors and deprivations which were inflicted upon ethnic groups in Russia during and after the World War II. So please attend. The communist authorities banned both the Arabic and Latin scripts in 1928 and ordered the demolition of 4,000 mosques and Islamic schools in the North Caucasian part of Soviet Russia. In 1937, Joseph Stalin declared that the North Caucasians were a petty capitalist people who must be eradicated from the Soviet family of nations, In 1938, he ordered a mass deportation of the Caucasian Muslims to Siberia. A petty capitalist, or kulak, was defined as one who in the last 10 years possessed 3 cows or 100 sheep and who uttered a critical remark against the Russian Communist Party and the great Stalin. The German invasion of the USSR interrupted the ongoing Soviet genocide of the North Caucasian Muslims. This is a citation from the Barnes Review, July-August 1998, page 38. Now, some of you say, well, now you keep on referring to Jewish Marxist revolutionaries ravishing Eastern Europe and toppling the Romanovs and so forth, but I've noticed you haven't named any names. Well, consider the following. The extermination of Chechens, Ingushes, and Dagestanis in 1944 was an unspeakable crime against humanity committed by Russian and Georgian communists. This crime was not a product of Joseph Stalin's cruelty alone. The obliteration of Ingushetia and Chechnya was a scientific, calculated program of genocide carried out with typical Bolshevik savagery and ruthlessness. It reflected not only the policy of blind hatred of Muslims, it was a criminal experiment in the mass liquidation of whole nations for the sake of an irrational political vengeance and in the name of the very rational ideology of enforcing the stability of the Soviet Empire. On January 31, 1944, Joseph Stalin, L. Beria, and S. N. Kruglov, A. N. Apollonov, V. N. Merkulov, I. I. Pashchev, V. S. Abakumov, E. S. Khrushchev, N. P. Stakhanov, and B. Z. Kobalov ordered the Supreme Soviet to issue a decree, ukaz, calling for the liquidation and deportation of the inconvenient Chechens. The chief of the Chechen section of the NKVD, the murderous secret police of the USSR's Interior Ministry, a Comrade Y. Milstein, received Beria's confidential prikaz order on February 5. Lavrentiy Beria, a sadistic head of the NKVD who was born in Georgia, knew that Chechen youth would resist, so he ordered thousands of young Chechen conscripts sent to Belorussia to fight against retreating German panzer divisions. On February 11, 1944, 94,741 Chechens, that is, about 20% of the whole Chechen nation, were arrested and executed by NKVD firing squads. On February 23, the old and sick Chechens were separated from the families in Urus-Martan, Stary Ataji, and Groznya. They were drowned in lakes or stabbed with bayonets while their families were forced to watch. Young Muslim women were raped before their heads were smashed using gun butts or shovels. Children were massacred in front of their parents if herded Chechens showed the slightest sign of resistance. In the village of Karbakh, Soviet troops led by an officer named Goveshany locked up 700 Muslim men and women in a mosque and then burned them alive. In March 1944, Commissar B. Z. Kobalov, chief of the Narkom NKVD, a special section for the People's Affairs of the Soviet Security Police, used 194 trains consisting of 12,525 cars for transportation of all Chechens, Ingushes, and Dagestanis who survived the first pogroms to the concentration camps of Siberia, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. In every cattle car, 45 Muslim men, women, and children forced into a standing position traveled for 25 to 30 days. More than 200,000 Chechens died in these trains from exhaustion and typhoid. According to Mahdi Saeva, a survivor of the Muslim Holocaust in Russia, The death trains were supervised by the directors of Ordzhonikidze Railways, K.T. Vashkanov and K.V. Ilchenko. Only 500,000 Chechens, Ingushers, and Dagestanis survived the Soviet concentration camp. Please consider. Before the extermination of Chechen Muslims in the concentration camps of the Siberian Gulag, millions of non-Muslim Balts, Ukrainians, native White Russians, Germans, and Poles perished in the Soviet factories of death in Kolyma, Magadan, Solovetskia Krai, Leninogorsk, and in labor colonies alongside Pekora or Lena. More than 9 million Ukrainians and Cossacks were starved to death between 1920 and 1939. In 1943, the victorious German troops unearthed the mass graves of the Soviet killing fields in the formerly occupied territories and invited international Red Cross teams from neutral countries like Sweden, Spain, and Switzerland. The Red Cross investigators confirmed the Soviet crimes. Churchill and Roosevelt maintained silence. Well, that's all the time we have. This is iVideo. My name is John Savers. I'm your host. I appreciate your tuning in. Hope to see you again next time.